And I think everything you're doing is absolutely right, isn't it? You know, there's more than reasonable effort going into to try out all of the new technologies and show it can be done, but also frank assessment of some of the challenges it presents, and they're real. You know, we need to tick each of those off as an industry and get them solved. But it is a journey, isn't it? And electric vehicles feels like it's tipped, for want of a better word, doesn't it? You know, it is going to happen now. It's just how fast. And I think we are a short period of time away from, you know, electric heating and, you know, being able to disconnect houses from gas potentially, and have everything working on electricity. But it takes a few brave souls like yourself to go out there and do it before it's necessarily economically sensible, and you know, maybe even do it before it works quite as well as the old solution. But you still got to press on and do it.
You've got to kind of do it. Yes, I mean, I do feel that it's become my responsibility. I mean, I'm fascinated by it, and I've got a wife who's tolerating it, so that makes it bearable. I mean, I'm not allowed to talk about it. We went through a period where she said, "Let me get comfy." She'd sit on the sofa and get comfy. She'd say, "Okay, you can do 5 minutes. You can talk about all your battery stuff," and I'd start, and then I go, "No, it doesn't matter. Don't worry about it." Yeah. But then the interesting thing with that is, I actually think Judy, my missus, has sold. She's certainly been directly involved in selling a lot of electric cars to her mates. So she'll go to someone's house. Her book group, for example, there's 8 women in that book group. I think 4 of them now have electric cars. Well, that's it. That's nothing to do with me. That's to do with her. So she's gone there, and they go, "Was that one of Robert's electric cars?" You go, "I don't know." She's not interested. And then they have a go in it. They go, "Oh my God, we're going to get one." You know?
I think that's perfect, because I think, you know, that the real sort of dyed-in-the-wool enthusiast can influence to a certain extent. But also, you know, when someone who's not really deep into the technology or not really interested in all of the sort of background of it starts being able to, you know, influence other people to do it, that's the true sign that this is happening, isn't it?
And she's got that slightly offhand Australian way of, you know, when people have asked her in car parks, I've been with her, you know, she gets out of the Tesla or the Kona or whatever, and someone goes, "Oh, you know," someone comes out, "Oh, what's that like then?" And she goes, "Oh, I don't know, it's better." What? Better than what? Oh, better than the old shit.
But better.
Yeah, better than the old shit cars. They're shit. This is better. That's the hard sales pitch that she'll do.
Well, that's probably all most people need to know, though, isn't it? So, what the tip in the throttle response is not too interesting to the actual person. Yes, is it better or worse? Is better. Okay, that'll do me.
Yeah.
So I realise. Sorry.
All I was going to say was that, yes, I mean, further to what you were saying is that, you know, that I've been lucky in the last few years to be in a position, I'm very aware of it, that I can afford to put in a battery in my house and solar panels on the roof and amazing electric water heaters. And we've done shows about them, but, you know, because often people go, "Oh, you just get given everything by Tesla." I can't, you know, it's so important to underline the fact that it doesn't matter who you are, Tesla do not give you anything.
Yeah.
I always cite the fact that Leonardo DiCaprio, last time I heard about this, had 4 Teslas, and he'd paid full price for every single one of them. He'd never, I think that's a genius bit of marketing. They don't need to give Leonardo DiCaprio. It's a much better marketing ploy that he's bought it because he wants one. I mean, he can afford it, for crying out loud. That's like you and me buying a mint. Eric's bought 4 mint sweeties. Oh my God. Yeah.
Well, I guess almost inevitably we focused heavily on the area that we both have an awful lot of crossover in. But the other bit I just really wanted to go a bit more is just to find out a bit more about the future plans for Fully Charged, I suppose. So, you know, where's it going next? You know, has Netflix been on the telephone? You know, what's the next thing that goes on?
No, I mean, it's a music. There's a very. I'll try and do it quickly. There's an amusing story. So a very good, a really nice man. He's lovely. Who worked on Scrapheap for many years, and he was a producer and director on Scrapheap, and I stayed with him in his house in Los Angeles. We worked together a lot for a long time. Lovely guy. He then became the head of non-scripted entertainment at Netflix. Not the sub-head or the assistant or something, the boss. Yeah. He's an English guy, lives in Los Angeles, has an American family, and I used to always see him if I was working in Los Angeles. So I was there filming the Jaguar I-Pace when that was launched in Los Angeles. I was there with Jaguar, and he said, "Oh, let's have lunch." And by then I knew what he did. He'd been there about a year at Netflix. So then at the lunch he said, "You've got to pitch me. I love Fully Charged. It's brilliant. We've got to pitch me something." And I said, I don't want it that because you're all a mate and it'll all go weird if I pitch. I don't want to, because that's the whole reason I did Fully Charged, was so I didn't have to pitch it to a TV executive. And I explained that, I know, shut up. And he used a lot of bad language, just pitch to me. So I went, oh, all right. So I came back and we spent time and money and thought and energy designing an idea for a Netflix show, which I sent to him. When would that have been? Whenever the iPace came out, whatever year that was, 2016. And then now every year I've got a GIF that a young person helped me, an animated GIF, which is the tumbleweed blowing across the Mojave Desert. And it's got the sound of wind and a distant Mexican church bell, dong, because I have never heard a thing from my best mate. So I do know the right people, and it's of no help whatsoever. So it wasn't a terribly good idea. So the long story short, we are now working towards doing a longer form series on Amazon Prime. So that's what we haven't done it yet. It's not on there yet, but we've been talking to Amazon. They're really keen for us to do it. And Amazon Prime is sort of, in a way, the relationship you have with Amazon for that is more like YouTube. So they're not commissioning it. They're not paying us to do it. They're not giving us a commission, but which is kind of good, because the struggle to maintain editorial independence is brutal and bitter no matter what happens. But we've managed to get this far, particularly in the last year, without quite, either collapsing or being proudly sponsored by the Koch brothers, which is always, always tempting. But so it's a really difficult journey, because no one's really done it. There's not when I worked for commercial television, there was an office I never went to where they sold TV commercials, and that's where the money came from that paid for the show that I was in. There was no relationship. So now this is so much more complex and there's not really a kind of accepted structure as to how you do that.
I obviously work in a slightly different industry, but the concept of somehow managing the economic realities of a business with also staying true to your vision and your mission is not lost on me in any way, shape or form. So I understand not the detail, but certainly the concepts of what you're trying to navigate there.
Yeah. No, it is a mindful. I mean, and I am uniquely unqualified to do it. So Dan Caesar, who I work with, who's the managing director of Fully Charged, is a businessman, understands that, has done it before. I mean, it was such a blessing to have met him, because by now Fully Charged wouldn't be here. It would be made once every 2 months by me, badly shot on my phone. Where I forget what car I'm in. It would have been very amateurish. So it's become there's definitely the fact that there's a small team that helps produce it, that there's other presenters. It's become sort of a bigger entity than I'm definitely not cut out for business management. I don't know how to do business management. Can't we all just get on? That's my business management. So it's been a tough journey, but I mean fascinating as well. It's not whatever else it's been. It's never been boring. It's been frustrating and annoying and brilliant and wonderful and depressing, but it's not been boring. It's been very stimulating.
But it doesn't appear in any way to have removed any of your passion and enthusiasm from that journey, though. That seems to all genuinely be there. It's not something you can sort of turn on, is it? You've got to genuinely have that sort of enthusiasm to do it ongoing for 10 years. Yeah,
I mean, there's certainly days when I'm just knackered and I can't be bothered to think about it, which I think is not unhealthy. I don't think that's bad. I used to feel guilty about that. I don't anymore. That's fine. Just I kind of want to put a tweet out, go, I'll just shut up and buy a diesel. I can't be bothered with it anymore. And then then I'll read something or see something and go, that is amazing. I'm amazed at basically it's my love of engineering and of engineers and how they do stuff, and have people like you, the way you've developed that business, I just find fascinating, and I see it and I use it and it's real, and you go, that is brilliant that someone has done that. That similar vision in a way I find really inspiring, and that does fill me with hope that there is another way of doing it. And I think that there's a book I'm reading at the moment, which I think is written by someone a lot younger than me, but it really nails down my generation. So if you think I'm just about to turn 65, so from my age, I'm at the tail end of it. So for someone who's now 75, to me, that generation, that 10-year generation, who were hippies, who created the alternative society, who did the first sort of hipster publishing of hip magazines and all that. It was a big cultural explosion, some of which I will still defend to this day was incredibly positive and helped put the foundations in for things like renewable energy, for the understanding of that, and feminism and anti-racism and all those. So really positive things came out of that generation, but also some really unimaginably stupid negative things. And you've got to acknowledge those. So to name but one person, I lived in a squat in London in 1974-5, and was a leading light hippie. And he drove me mad then, and I hadn't, I've not heard of him. It took me about 2 years of to go, oh my God, you mean that was his brother? Oh my God! So that tainted my view of rather badly, because I just knew that was an idiot, climate denier, now virus denier. I mean, what the? You can do climate denying is suddenly becomes quite benign. Climate change denying, oh, that's perfectly fine, reasonable argument to be at that. But virus denying, when there's thousands of people dying of it, and you saying it isn't real, anyway, I won't use bad language. But so my generation, there was a point I was going to make about my generation. Well, we're about to cark it. We're going to shuffle off because we're the sort of tail end of the baby boom. The boomers, and there's certain key things that they did that I sort of will defend. I think that's because I've been quite cynical about my generation, going, we were useless, we were the most selfish. I've just remembered what it is. So the notion of being selfish, I was discussing this recently about adopting the technologies that you and I are talking about and that you've been very deeply involved with. It should be seen not as a selfless act, because, I'm doing this for the good of the planet or to help my grandchildren, because there's something about that kind of pious stuff that you just know isn't real. I'm doing it because it's important for me, because I want to make the world better for me now, today. That's why it's urgent. I want people to stop burning diesel today, because it stinks and it's really bad for kids. Not even my kids, someone else's kids, but it's bad for us. So it's a selfish act. I'm being selfish and self-obsessed, and I want the world to be better now. And that kind of enthusiasm I've kind of understood that's really important, and that shouldn't be denigrated. And I'm doing it for completely selfish reasons. I want to walk through the streets of London without going, it stinks. It can't be good for me, which until the last 12 months was the case. It has shifted things, and I think we will see a shift now. I really do.
Well, I think that's good, and keep bringing the enthusiasm, because I think it's absolutely vital.
Yeah.
The last bit, as we're heading towards the end of our hour together, Robert, I've got a little quick fire round, which I wonder if you'd be willing to me. It's not enormously long, so I don't think it'd take forever. But your favourite EV that you've come across any shape or size?
Oh, God, it is so hard. That is so hard, because there's. I mean, I can do a few. So I drive a Tesla Model 3, and it's so hard not to be a massive screaming Tesla fanboy. And I mean, the most recent software update, I didn't even know it had a software update. I got in it and I went, huh? Because it was all different. It's so much better, so it's improving all the time. Yeah. So that is very hard. The ones that I've had a short test drive of that I love, the Fiat 500e, you just get in that car and you go, oh, this is brilliant. The Honda E, again, was another one of those. I didn't have any. I think it's always good when you don't have preconceptions. You haven't seen too many pictures of it, and you get in it, you go, this is really cool. And then, particularly for me, not being a professional automotive journalist that knows the hourly history of this company going back 90 years, if I get in it and I go bing and it's on and I go and it drives, I go, that is good. I don't know how I did that. It just worked,
Yeah.
And there's somewhere that's automatic and you don't even know, and there's somewhere you're trying to work out how to turn the wipers on for 10 minutes, and or the sat nav voice. There's an episode coming soon where I really have an emotional struggle with the sat nav. I could not. It was the Terminator sat nav. You cannot stop it. It will not stop. We did everything. We turned everything off, and then you come turn left here. Shut up. But so I mean, a favourite. It is a really difficult one. I mean, it is very hard not to cite Tesla, just because they set the bar. They've set the bar so high. The Polestar 2, beautiful, really, just a beautifully made, and I like the look of it. And I've just driven the Taycan for 2 days, the Porsche Taycan, and you go, I don't want to be impressed. I'm not interested in sports cars. It's stupid and it's really expensive. Oh my God! It's such an amazing car to drive. And I drove it a long way and I didn't have backache. If a man my age can get out of a sports car, effectively what is a sports car, and not groan, that's a really good sign. It was easy to get in and out of, and I was really comfortable driving it. And it's an amazing piece of engineering. It's not surprising. I guess they should be really good at it.
Well, I guess in not answering my question, in a way you have answered my question,
Yes.
which is I think you're loving the range that is now available.
Yes,
I don't
I
mean
think
range
so.
in miles. I mean the multiple different segments of the car world which are available to different people, I think is perhaps the
the one that's got me to laugh the most recently, it was a bit like the I always remember the first time I drove the Renault Twizy. I drove it across London in hysterical laughter. I couldn't believe I was driving a 1970s bathroom fitting through the West End. It was just so funny. And the most recent one was
fitting windows.
yeah, no windows at all. But the most recent one was the Citroen Ami, which is a similar thing. It's it's a quadra whatever they call it, a quadra bike or whatever. Quadricycle, yes. It was I just kept laughing. It just made me giggle, and that's slightly more conventional. It's, you'd sit side by side, the driver and passenger, tiny little thing, can go to. I think you could get it to, if you were going downhill, probably 35 miles an hour, absolutely thrashing it. But if you're in a city, it just made so much sense. You could park it in where you'd park a bicycle. It took no room up, and was in terms of its kilowatt hours per mile, mind-boggling. It's doing like 9 miles to the kilowatt hour. That's for such a huge number of journeys that human beings make in cities. That's hyper adequate, and so much less impact on the world than a 3.5 ton diesel SUV. Doing the same bloody journey. It's ridiculous.
What about the sort of retrofit stuff of any of the sort of classic cars that are suddenly being remade with electrics? Have any of those caught your eye?
Yeah, I mean, my favourite one to drive was I think a 1970s Range Rover that had been beautifully converted, and that was like we drove over incredibly rough ground up on a Welsh mountain. And it was like being in a boat on mildly rocky, rough sea. It just wallowed, because the drivetrain and suspension in those things is amazing. And it had no trouble at all. And that was an interesting thing. I've noticed that on 2 big, heavy 4x4 conversions, is when you're doing 5 or 10 miles an hour on boggy, soft ground, if you're in a combustion engine car, you're keeping the engine running, you're slipping the clutch, you've got to keep that momentum going. In this, it was... And you could see how much nothing. It would drive all day at that speed. It was using there was no force, no energy use. It's incredible. When you were driving along the road at 50 miles an hour, it was savage.
It's the 70s aerodynamics then came to work against
absolutely, you. Yeah. But then there's I haven't actually driven it. I've seen it. A beautiful, because I had a Land Rover Defender, was my last combustion car, which I kept for years, which we used on Scrapheap. It was a real roughy-tufty old Land Rover.
You learnt how not to take your elbow out on the window frame as you turn the steering wheel in.
Yes, in terms of human-machine interface, fairly basic. But I loved it.
Character for it.
Yes, but then there's some electric conversions now of Defenders that are legend, and that is I have to say I'm tempted to, I mean, it is an expensive thing to do, but you could. I know someone who's quite near me who's a knackered Land Rover dealership, and I could probably buy a Land Rover Defender, a 90 Land Rover Defender with no engine or gearbox for not that much money, and then convert it. But I don't think I will. It's not necessary. But I'm so glad people are doing it. I mean, then that business, that industry, if you like, is expanding enormously. And that's one of the things I'm determined to do. It might still not be this year, but I will do it before I kick the bucket. Is we want to make an episode called Scrapheap Challenge, which is fairly obvious. I think all your listeners will know. So it's Scrapheap, but with batteries. So it will be to build a machine that isn't a car out of old Tesla and Nissan Leaf batteries and motors and all that stuff. So we've got the teams that want to do it. So this is all from those people who are at the moment doing it, and they're desperate to do it. The original production company are involved in it to do it. We were going to do it last year. We had it all worked out. So hopefully we will be able to do that at some point.
Well, I think that would be fantastic to join up two of your key life achievements together. Would be pretty ace, wouldn't it?
Would love to do that. Yeah, so that's at the moment a pipe dream, but it's a plausible one. But I mean, I think that is a fascinating. I think that hit the public eye. I think, although I'm not sure how many people knew at the royal wedding when they drove off in the E-Type Jaguar. Yeah. And when people heard, it took sort of a few days. I remember being, because I'd seen that car before they drove it, and that was electric, and people went, "What? Why is that electric?" That got a lot of people thinking about it and wondering what that was like. That was a beautiful conversion they did, absolutely extraordinary. But it's the quality of those companies and the quality of the conversions are doing is extraordinary, and the cheapness now. So there's Kevin Sharp in Ireland who's New Electric, the company are. They're in Netherlands and Ireland. They're kind of converting Lexus hybrid cars using they're keeping the electric motor that was part of the hybrid drive, taking out the engine, the gearbox, the petrol, everything, the tank, and they're doing this for like €2,000. They've got an electric car with a 60-mile range. No, it's only base, but hang on, that's nothing. That's the cost of a second-hand car. That's extraordinary. The changes that are taking place with that stuff is really remarkable. And as the cost of those comes down, that is, I think, brilliant. A brilliant way. And I think it depends on. So there's people I know who have classic cars. Chris Barry from Red Dwarf has some beautiful, amazing old classic cars. But I think it would be a tragedy to convert them. I want there to be beautiful old combustion engine cars around for the village fete or the special motor museum, or goes out for a drive
like
on a
steam
Sunday.
Traction engine is used today. Is that
yeah,
what it is?
Exactly. Yeah, you don't want to get rid of. You need those. I want a kid who isn't born for 20 years, who will never see combustion engines. Thankfully, they won't have to live with them. But then to go out one day.
Why does it rattle, Dad? What's that all about? Oh my
God, Grandad, what's happening in that car? There's a lot of explosions going on. Thankfully, they're inside a big tin can. I mean, it is the most. That I think is. You and I will hopefully live to see that, where young people ask, was it really a big metal box at the front of the car which had explosions in it? Yes.
There's one that I always refer back to, and I'm sure you and I have talked about it, but I think it's on a Swedish Tesla forum as a random place, but it's a few years old now, but it's a spoof of an electric vehicle driver test driving an internal combustion engine for the first time.
Yeah.
And it talks about all those bits you've just talked about, and it just sort of points out what will our children say when we explain to them how we used to drive these petrol and diesel powered internal combustion engine vehicles.
Yeah.
They'll think we're absolutely nuts, won't they?
Yes, absolutely. And it's because I remember I drove a beautiful American steam car on Scrapheap, because I think we'd made steam engines or something, and it was exquisite. But the complexity of driving that machine, because it wasn't just a clutch and gear, but it had a big lever outside the door that engaged the. I can't remember what it was, but what was amazing, it was a really big, heavy car. It had it was burning what we'd call paraffin. What do they call kerosene? I suppose it had a kerosene burner that would go out, and that's what was creating the steam. And when he lit it again, this was a big car that weighed something like 2.5 tons. The car jumped, so that made you very, very nervous. He said, "Don't worry," and he had to He had a long sort of
match with a 3-meter pole.
It was that. He had to put it down a hole, and it would go boom, and the whole thing would shudder. And then but once that had amazing acceleration. Once you opened that baby up, it just shot off. It was amazing. But the complexity of driving that's what a child born in 10 years' time, when they first see a car, they go, "Oh my God, you had to put one foot down and then move the stick,
gears and clutches,
and then take the other foot off, and then
it carries on running when you stop. Why does he do that?"
Yes, because I actually drove it came back pretty quick, but the first 250 metres, I stalled twice, right on a roundabout in Italy. They get ever so moody. I just did the kangaroo because I forgot to put clutch. Oh my God, how does this thing work? It's amazing how you do. I'm old. I've been driving probably 40 years before I ever drove an electric car, so I was used to it then. But it has gone, that skill set.
A dying art, hopefully.
Yeah.
Great. Well, that's been absolutely wonderful. Thank you, Robert. I've really enjoyed having a chat with you. It's gone well over our allotted time.
Sorry.
No, don't apologise.